To be honest, it's quite hard to ask for something better than what we're seeing right here because this setup that we've got on the chart is still a super healthy consolidation. Now, obviously, Bitcoin's dominance has taken a pretty decent rise up here. From the low, it's managed to gain 1.5%, which is big, right? I mean, you can see that being reflected in the altcoin markets. Here is now finally a pronounced rejection for Ethereum against Bitcoin, which is definitely very good to see. It just means that the market's moving naturally, and we'll get to how this might influence the market later on. I definitely think that this indicates much higher upside for Bitcoin, for altcoins as time goes on. So that's absolutely fantastic. But if we just take a look at traditional finance before we really kick this off, it's still looking great. The S&P 500 is trading at an all-time high right now, which is absolutely fantastic, with an hour and a half to go at the time of recording. So that's definitely a strong indication that these markets are still in a healthy place, right? I mean, if Bitcoin is pulling back a little bit on a day like today, that's not a concern to me at all. Obviously, yesterday, Bitcoin was moving up quite nicely, and the S&P 500 was, somewhat kind of stable, in comparison, right, on Tuesday. So there's obviously always going to be some level of kind of variation here, but I think that there's definitely a really, really good kind of setup here on Bitcoin right now. Obviously, the support that we were talking about on this channel is still somewhat concerning, right? This is the first time we've ever traded at these price levels in Bitcoin's history. And with that in mind, we are testing this level quite a bit, right? If we kind of take a look at how long it's been since we got up here, it's now been, 12 going on 13 days that Bitcoin has kind of used this level as support, which you don't want to see too much over-reliance on support, especially when it's a brand new level. And especially, for me, this is a kind of, it's not even a round number. Not that these things are particularly important, but, I do think that it's something to kind of keep an eye out for. But the good news is that we can start to kind of draw triangles of some sort. I mean, it's kind of hard to draw them, obviously, and there's going to be different ways to draw them. But I think the bottom line that we're kind of seeing right now is that Bitcoin is in a sort of, consolidation range of sorts. You had a big wick up here and a couple wicks down to the bottom, but for the most part, you're kind of just trading sideways inside of what looks like a typical kind of consolidation continuation pattern, which I think definitely indicates further upside moves here. One of the easy ways that we can kind of extrapolate a target is just kind of measuring, how high this thing went, either up to this high or up to this high. I'm going to choose this one right here. And then, put this at the bottom of the range that we're at right now. And this does still give us a really nice speculative target in line with what we were already expecting at 130k roughly, right? Somewhere in that range. So I think that's absolutely fantastic. I think that's a really, really good sign for this market here. And basically, it's the best thing we could ask for. So I think what we're looking for right now is going to be a little bit more kind of continuation. And we're really setting ourselves up for that if Bitcoin's dominance is kind of climbing a little bit higher, right? Like, I'm not expecting necessarily a huge alt season right now. I know that a lot of other people are, but that's okay. I could be wrong about this, but I don't think that we're quite there yet. So I think it definitely makes sense that Bitcoin is kind of, just pulling back a little bit. And the really good news about all of this is there's just so much support for Bitcoin to enjoy right now. The support is getting higher. The support is looking a little bit more aggressive, and I think that's definitely indicating that as far as time-based corrections go, which is what we're in right now, by the way, we had a minor price-based correction here that's dropped down by about 5.8%, nothing too crazy, but the main thing I think that this market is really kind of experiencing right now is the pain of time, which is more typical for Bitcoin these days. And with that in mind, I think that this is actually looking pretty good, right? Like, you've got support kind of angling higher now, which I think is absolutely fantastic. I love the kind of momentum indicators as well here on the daily time frame. And if we take a look at the daily EMA ribbon, we're nearly at the current price here. So, just a couple more days really, and you should be able to see Bitcoin finding potentially a little bit of support on this daily EMA ribbon, which, has been pretty decent, right? I mean, since we kind of flipped bullish again over here on this kind of shorter term perspective, we nearly got a bounce over here. We got a couple of bounces over here with a fake out in between, and so to me, I think, this kind of daily EMA ribbon can definitely end up providing a little bit of support to Bitcoin if necessary. Obviously, on the downside, the analysis remains the same. It's the same thing we were discussing on this YouTube channel previously, which is pretty much that this is an interesting kind of, resistance level that Bitcoin had faced when it was initially kind of breaking up. And if we actually draw this back, this is very nearly where Bitcoin topped out earlier in this year in January. But, I don't think that's too important right now. I think it's just the fact that, this is potentially going to be a support level here if Bitcoin does end up falling down. Now, obviously, if Bitcoin does end up falling from here, it might turn into a bigger drop, right? We've been consolidating for 12 days. And so, dropping at this point wouldn't be a good sign. It would probably indicate that longs are about to get flushed out. Okay, and if that's going to happen, then you've definitely got to watch this, because this could turn into a much bigger correction, especially if people start getting scared, which I think is quite possible at this stage in the market. Let's take a quick look at the fear and greed index though, and see what this is saying right here. We've got a reading of 74. Yesterday was 72. We're kind of just hovering, right below extreme greed here. So there's definitely room for things to correct down, but, we're not exhausted either. And that's why I'm leaning more on, what's traditional finance doing, right? I mean, today's only Wednesday, and we've got, Thursday and Friday's trading sessions up ahead, and that's a lot of time for the S&P to kind of continue looking bullish, as we were predicting on this channel, toward the beginning of this week here. And if that is the case, I don't really see how Bitcoin's going to be kind of stuck behind, with all of that in mind there. I think that this is definitely looking pretty decent, actually, from that particular perspective. Now, if we take a look at a couple of altcoins, I think this is what's a little bit more interesting. Solana managed to get a pretty good breakout from this level that we were watching here, and it's now nearly coming back down to retest this range. Depending on kind of how you define it, we've already retested this range with the wick that we're on right now on the daily, but I definitely think that there's more space for this to continue to drop, especially if Bitcoin kind of falls down to the bottom of its range, right? Bitcoin's got, probably the bottom of its range, probably looking at about, 116.8, something a little bit like that. And if Bitcoin does kind of tumble a little bit lower down there, I think we're going to see a lot of altcoins hitting these really nice pockets where actually, they turn into quite easily digestible trades, of kind of going long off, some of these support levels here, which I think can definitely be interesting. Now, those of you that are interested in a platform to trade these markets, obviously you've got two of the best exchanges in the game right here. Bybit is head and shoulders above everything else in the game, as far as I'm concerned. They've been around for a very long time, great liquidity. It's exactly what you're expecting. You get a ton of free cash when you sign up using this link down here. So that's super cool. And if you want to get more exclusive chart updates from the team, then Levex is right here. Very similar platform to Bybit, great liquidity, proof of reserves, all that good stuff, and some really nice kind of aggressive starting bonuses here. You can essentially kind of double your deposit and when you start trading on Levex here, which I think is super, super cool. So check that stuff out if you're not from a restricted region. But bringing it back to the video here, like I said, tons of kind of support levels starting to open up if we do end up continuing to drop a little bit lower. Definitely some blood here. If we look at Solana against BTC topping out at one of the resistance levels that we had outlined for quite some time here, it would be nice to see it kind of reset down to the bottom of this range right here, which is going to be about 0.0015 BTC per token. So that's something that we'll kind of keep an eye out for as well. Here's XRP taking a little bit of a shit today, to be honest. It's really dropped kind of harshly, which is what we were expecting. It's something that we've already spoken about on this YouTube channel, how XRP can take pretty harsh drops, pretty quickly. I mean, from its high, which is also its all-time high, it's managed to drop by about 13% in 5 days, or really, most of this drop happened within just a day and a bit. So I think that there's definitely, some nicer opportunities that might start to open up here. Here's XRP against Bitcoin really taking a bit of a beating. And again, in exactly the same fashion as Ethereum, right? Like Ethereum hit its resistance range and then it kind of started to tumble. It looks like XRP is kind of doing something similar right here. And I think this is fantastic, right? I mean, if XRP can kind of find support maybe somewhere in the mid-range, let's put a line right here, somewhere around here. That would be a really nice range to kind of see XRP finding some support at, maybe even towards the bottom of the range if we're really lucky, because that means we're getting a nice big reset, and obviously in a very, very bullish environment, that probably means that our next attempt can really bring us to some much higher levels against Bitcoin for these altcoins here. So I think that's definitely quite exciting. Here's Trump coin, another one that you guys know I like to watch. It did end up hitting the resistance level that I was looking at with you guys here at about $12. This is what we outlined on one of the recent videos. So again, shout out to those of you that are subscribed, got that bell icon checked so you're not missing out on any of this valuable content here, especially considering it's so time sensitive. But it's now kind of fallen back down to, what I described would actually be a pretty interesting buy level. So, what I think is interesting about this, right, is if you're kind of starting to look at, opening up some positions on a coin like Trump, it's not too hard to kind of start picking out stop losses, right? If we zoom in a little bit and try and appreciate what this chart is telling us, this is probably, I think there's some, pretty good cause to kind of put a stop loss down here. Obviously, you can get a lot tighter, and you're just running a slightly higher risk here, and then targeting the upside, you're starting to get some really nice risk to reward. And this is Trump, but this applies across the spectrum, right? A lot of coins are in these really, really good positions right now, where if traders are still feeling bullish despite what's happened here, which I don't really see a reason to kind of change that bias right now, then those coins are looking pretty good. Now, obviously, like I said, the risk here is that things just kind of collapse. Bitcoin has been testing its support level for too long, and if it collapses, then even just to this 112, 111k support zone, that could definitely spell some issues for these other altcoins here, including the ones with really, really good setups, right? Because they'll just break market structure if Bitcoin does. Ultimately, as we know, they're just going to kind of follow what Bitcoin does. So that's going to be something that we'll have to keep on kind of watching and keeping an eye out for as it continues to develop. But as it stands right now, I think we're looking pretty good. I think that Bitcoin's still in a good place. I think that on the daily time frame, this is super healthy consolidation. I mean, you cannot fault what this market is showing you right now. Like I said, you could take a shit a little bit like XRP, right? XRP kind of had the same thing going and it did this. So it's entirely possible that Bitcoin does the same thing. But I think, from what I'm seeing, it looks like that money is just kind of flowing back into Bitcoin right now. And obviously that is, of course, something we can see quite clearly just by studying the Bitcoin dominance chart, right? I mean, this was, quite a few days of non-stop dropping. This was like over a week of Bitcoin dominance just losing ground. So, even just a reaction rally here, I think definitely makes sense. And that's something that we'll, kind of keep an eye out for, because it could definitely be something like, Bitcoin dominance maybe rises a little bit higher and then continues to drop down and sets a new low for this little micro range that we're in here. So that's something we'll keep an eye out for. If that does happen, by the way, I think that significantly increases the chances that you could see at least a mini alt season right now, because that means essentially, a lot of money flowed into Bitcoin, but, it wasn't happy sitting in Bitcoin. That money wants to take risk again, which is quite likely, if the S&P 500 and so on are still looking good, that can definitely indicate that there's going to be more upside yet to come for these altcoins, and plenty of space for that to develop as well, right? I mean, if we take a look at coins like Solana with its support level here, if it's able to use this support and run, I mean, 260 and beyond is super, it's pretty reasonable in my opinion, right? I mean, there's not a whole lot of resistance up here, and if we go back and look at all of Solana's price history in this range, there's not a lot to kind of see over here, right? So, if you've got a kind of prevailing bullish bias and you're backtesting these levels, well then, that's more or less just Christmas, right? I mean, that's one of the best things that you could ask for. So I'm definitely quite happy to be seeing that right there. Other coins like Binance Coin holding pretty steady, right? I mean, it's still sitting at about 770. It hasn't actually pulled back by very much at all. So definitely in a pretty good place here with some of these more stable altcoins. Here's Binance Coin against Bitcoin, still struggling a little bit, still below this range, which you really don't want to be, for Binance holders. But obviously we're just going to have to kind of continue to watch that and see how that develops as things go on. But for this video, ladies and gents, that's pretty much all I can say here. I mean, it's looking good. If we move up, we've got some really nice, exciting targets. We've been consolidating for a while. Our indicators are catching up. This is nothing out of the ordinary. This is exactly kind of more or less what we're looking for, what we're expecting. So, me, that's what I like to do. I like to keep things super simple. I don't like to stress myself out with these markets. I don't like to take things, too I don't know, emotionally or personally with the markets. It just looks like markets are kind of consolidating most of the time, and obviously you make your money by being patient in these markets. So I think that's been quite literally paying off quite well for those of you that have managed to kind of hold on to your your bags with your diamond hands and so on. So I think that's absolutely fantastic. So those of you that are interested in trading on these phenomenal platforms, check them out with the links in the description. If you're interested in our amazing one-to-one offer, that's going to be with this link down below here. It is a 12-week program, super serious. Reach out if you might be interested in that, and a member of the team will get back to you with information on it. But other than that, ladies and gents, if you are checking these out, make sure you're not from a restricted region. Other than that, make sure you smash up those likes, subscribe, tick the bell, do all that good stuff, and we'll see you all in the next one.